So whenever they feel like they're getting too close to somebody, they might find ways to self-sabotage that relationship and push that person away because they don't want to experience that hurt and pain anymore. And then you have a third one, which is disorganized, which is kind of a combination of avoidant and anxious. And it's these people have kind of like a push and pull where they want to be close with somebody, but then another day they might pull away because it's too uncomfortable for them. And for somebody who's in a relationship with that person, that could be very confusing because it's just one day they're hot, the next day they're cold, and it's just a lot of instability and uncertainty in that relationship. And then you have a secure attachment when you can be in a relationship with somebody, have some emotional attunement, but you can also function really well outside of that relationship.
I like that word, emotional attunement.
Yeah.
I think that's so important, and not just in romantic relationships, but in non-romantic relationships as well. Bridget, ask you a personal question. What's your attachment style?
I would probably say disorganized. Yeah, I jump back and forth. I need reassurance. Then I just want to be left alone. Then I need reassurance again, and then I want to go off on my own. So, yeah, disorganized is probably the best one to describe me.
That's good. That's good. I'm coming at you. What's your attachment style?
I don't know. But I was listening to them, and I'm
All
like,
of them.
where do I fit in that? I kind of feel a little bit all of it sometimes. I don't. Yeah, I don't know if I fit in just
They
one.
they do have online assessments. You know, there's this one, I can't think of the name of it, but it's like it takes like 10 minutes to fill out, and it gives you your attachment style. You know, if I can think of the name of it, I'll pass it on to you guys. But I also have the disorganized attachment style too. And because I've always felt this need to, like, I want to be close to people. I want to be vulnerable and have emotional intimacy, but then it's like very uncomfortable for me. Yeah. So I find myself like pulling away from that. Yeah. So it's like I feel like I know a lot of people, but there's only like a few, amount of people that really I really let in and really know me for who I am.
Yeah, I feel like, because I'm an extreme introvert too, and so that and the attachment style, I'd be real hesitant.
Same.
Clyde, I'm come right back to you. You mentioned attachment styles developing in our childhood, but we know that some attachment styles are relational. Mm-hmm. The origin may not be in my childhood. It may be situational to my relationship. Can you talk about that, how relationships can kind of be the architect of our attachment styles, and what are some ways that we can kind of like self-assess ourselves to notify our attachment styles so we know when we hook up with the right person, attachment styles to look for and not to look for?
Yeah, so we definitely can seek out relationships that feel comfortable for us. You know, if there was a certain way that our family related to us, those are the attachments that we seek out in our romantic relationships. And I think just ways to kind of be more mindful of that is I think there's a certain level of accountability that you have to be willing to accept. You know, so if there's certain qualities, toxic qualities or negative qualities that you are portraying, you have to be open to that, constructive criticism from your partner, and let them kind of call you out on it and let them point out different patterns. Because a lot of it comes down to just lack of awareness. You know, we're just thinking that the way that we're moving in the world is just like normal because that's, what was normal in our family. So you don't even realize it until you get a different perspective. And I think also therapy is a great way to develop that sense of self-awareness and understand, how the way that you're relating to other people, is pushing people away, how it's causing people to feel overwhelmed or suffocated, how it's creating, codependency, how it's causing confusion in people. So I think, just to sum it up, it takes some self-awareness, letting other people hold you accountable, and just exploring that more in depth with a licensed clinical professional.
That's good. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. I want to talk to my virtual audience real quick. If you haven't already, please like this and share it. Everybody that's in the chat, please share it on your Facebook page right now. Pastor Buckner, it's two words that get thrown out there so casually these days: gaslighting and narcissism. Can you give us a proper definition of first gaslighting and narcissism?
I think it would be narcissistic of me to give you a clear definition of gaslighting. But no, so I'll start with narcissist because I think it feeds into the question of gaslighting. So a narcissist, from my perspective, is a person who has centralized themselves as the only character in their story. That you speak of attachment, that they see themselves as being influenced but not attached to anybody because they are the hero and the villain in the story. Gaslighting, similarly, takes concepts, takes ideas, takes identity, and finds a way to press into it in a dysfunctional manner, right? So you're taking some ideas, something that someone may be feeling, and using it as a tool to kind of demean and destroy their perspective of the story.
Mm-hmm. That's good. That's good. When it comes to narcissism, let me just throw this out there. Have anyone ever dealt with a narcissist in a intimate relationship or even a non-intimate relationship or a professional relationship? And what was your experiences like? Just hop in however you can.
Yeah, I definitely have. I've dealt with it in like romantically and in the workplace. And it was a very challenging situation, especially being a woman, and these were both men. And so in the workplace, it caused me to be very self-conscious of myself and like be very hard on myself. Like it was a lot of days I didn't even want to go to work because I was always in the wrong. It was always about everything else. Like it was just like, I don't want to do this. And so I think in a way, dealing with narcissism in the workplace pushed me further into entrepreneurship because it was kind of just like, I couldn't. And so, yeah, it was a very down type of situation. Like I would cry at work and everything. Like it was really bad.
Clark, can you talk about narcissistic abuse, how prevalent it is in personal relationships? Can you say a little something about that?
Yeah, a person who's narcissistic really lacks empathy, is very self-centered, doesn't really care about how their actions are affecting other people. And just at the center of narcissistic abuse, there's this idea of wanting to be, having authority, having power and control over somebody. You know, so if you find yourself in a relationship, whether it's romantic or personal relationship, who is doing that, the best thing that you can do is try as best as you can to get out of it. And sometimes that could be very difficult, especially if you have been in a relation with this person for a significant amount of time. You might have kids with them, whatever the case may be. But that's a personality disorder, you know, that takes years and years of therapy for that person to even have a sense of awareness of, you know, what their issue is. And it's pretty much impossible to have a healthy relationship with somebody who is narcissistic and who is abusing you. They almost have to go through their own years of therapy to be, you know, to unlearn some of those behaviors. So yeah, I would just say, you know, if you find yourself in that situation, you know, lean on your support system. There's a lot of great resources out there where you can find ways to get out of it. Yeah, I lost my train of thought. I'm sorry.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good. Gaslighting, narcissism, attachment styles are all personality traits that rear its ugly head in dating and personal relationships. Pastor Champs, do you think the church has done a good job with teaching young adults on how to date properly?
Boy, I think we all know the answer to that. It's such a taboo thing in the church. It's like you skip from, some churches have singles ministries, many don't, and it's like you skip from born to let's get married. You know, like there's no in between of how do I live this life as a single woman trying to figure out myself, my worth, my identity. And for men too, how do I live this life as a single man trying to figure out my worth, my identity? And there is no, I'm just gonna call it a map. There's no map in the church for it. And I do think that there's a lot of work to be done. We definitely need to take on the mantle to do the work because our people are perishing because of it. In and out of bad relationships, we learn things too late. And then once we've learned it, we've already been damaged, and now we need restorative methods to heal us. And you know, and it's biblical that we shouldn't be in certain entanglements, and it's because there are spiritual transferences that happens. But even that teaching doesn't, you know, come forth in the church the way that it should. And so I definitely think that that is one of the reasons why we have so many broken marriages and broken relationships now, because the foundation we haven't had the foundation to prepare the church for marriage. It's just, this is what you're supposed to do, and find your way to it, however you find your way to it. And then you get to it, and you like, what am I supposed to do now that I'm in it? And I think if people were really honest with themselves, they would have a similar response in their own marriages.
Pastor Buckner, you being a young adult pastor, you probably hear a lot from young adults of how they're dating. You probably even know they probably dated each other. How can the church improve on making dating a safer space for Christians or church mates? Or what can we do better?
I think that a lot of it will be centered on developing a why, right? I think we do a lot of we should do, we should be, but why? Why do you need that relationship right now? Why do you want that relationship? And it goes beyond romantic relationship. It goes into friendships. It goes into career paths. It goes into everything that we've actually been talking about, because a lot of times we tell people what to chase without telling them why. You want to be married. Why? What's the purpose behind marriage other than God said so? What's the purpose behind wanting to be joined except for, you know, the Bible says, well, it's not good for a man to be alone. Okay, cool, but why does it say that, right? I think we do a lot of teaching of this is what you should know without understanding. The Bible is clear when it says the beginning of wisdom is knowledge, so get knowledge, but in all thine getting, get understanding. Church does a great job at the know, at the knowledge, a poor job at developing a level of understanding that people can go live with. Because if I'm in a relationship, well, I'm supposed to be connected. Everybody else got married, I'm supposed to get married. Everybody else got connected. David had Jonathan, I gotta have one good friend.
Somebody.
Right? Right?
Somebody.
And so, okay, cool, go do that. But who you do that with is determined by your why. And the part of the issue, not to make it take a left, is we don't understand our why.
You talking.
Right? Purpose becomes about what I do and not why I do it, when the unfortunate part is that purpose is defined by why. Purpose is why something is created, why something exists, not that it exists. So.
Right.
That was good.
We're going to move on in a second. Bridget, I want to hear from you. How can the church make dating a safer space for us young adults? What can we do better?
I think that we just have to be open and transparent to everybody's story doesn't look the same. So everybody won't get married at 19, 20. Everybody won't, you know, some people don't even want to get married, you know, and so everybody's story won't be the same. And I think for the church, we have to be more open and we have to educate. Like, we can't be scared to have the conversations, because if they aren't having the conversations here, they're having the conversation somewhere else. So we have to be open to having those conversations. Because I'm going to be honest, when I was growing up in the church, we had about one conversation and that's all I got.
I heard about that.
And yeah, and the rest of it was just us figuring it out on our own. And because let's be real, when you grow up in the church, your church friends becomes your first boo, your first everything. And so even that, they don't even talk about that, like how we're just growing up with each other and we like each other. It's just, we have to be more open to starting the conversation and being open to wherever the conversation can take us, and just be prepared in 2023. So, yeah, I think that we just have to be open, transparent, and just ready to have the conversation in whatever form it looks like.
That's good. I want to move on, but I think this topic, something I want to say is, it's related to dating, but I think it's important to have a brief discussion on it. Claude, you're a therapist, but you're also a church boy. You know church. Your daddy's a pastor. You're a PK. How can the church do better in kind of helping their congregants navigate divorcees, or have we dropped the ball in that area? And how can we do better in being sure that divorced folk don't feel shame when they walk through that door?
Yeah, I think creating, I'm really big on just group dynamics and creating spaces for people that have experienced divorce, be able to congregate and come together and share their experiences. You have to create spaces for that. Because there's a lot of shame around divorce. Nobody wants to get divorced. It's a very stressful process. It's very financially taxing, and especially in a church environment, you might not feel that you're going to be accepted, or you might not feel comfortable coming back into a church environment, especially if the congregation was witnesses to how you developed your relationship and marriage, and that can cause a lot of division. So I think just creating spaces for groups of people who have had similar experiences, them being able to come together and just, provide support, help normalize, some of the things that they're experiencing, help provide hope, especially older members that have experienced divorce, kind of instill hope into the younger generation. Is like, this is how you can navigate through this. It doesn't mean like this is the end of your chapter. There's life after divorce. So just creating spaces for it in the congregation.
That's good. That's good. We talk about heartache from romantic relationships. We've talked about dealing with bad breakups and the effects and attachment styles and some of the negative personality traits that you can encounter in our intimate relationships. But Pastor Champs, have you ever had your heart broke by a friend?
You know what? I got to be honest, and I'm so grateful that I was very sheltered. Didn't know growing up that being sheltered would turn out to be a good thing for me. But it turned out to be a good thing for me because I didn't experience a lot of friendship, heartbreak growing up. I would say I didn't experience somewhat of a backstabbing situation, if you will, until I was well old enough to fully understand how to heal from it. And so I know that is not the norm. I know that is not the norm, but I've just been surrounded by people who have just loved me well.
That's good.
So
That's
I'm
good.
grateful for it. I recognize it.
That's a healthy testimony. Pastor Buckner.
I know all the trifling people, let me tell you. So it started, no, I'm joking.
In the age of no new friends, and everybody want to be a savage, cold hardness and being a butthole is a virtuous these days. Can you talk about how we mask some of our pain but it's really a cry out for community? Can you talk about that in the church and outside of the church?
For sure. I think a lot of times what ends up happening is it becomes the isolationist in us, right? That we tend to find ways to isolate and act out, if that makes sense, where we'll be the noticeable person who steps to the corner. We'll be the person who wants to be seen by themselves. We'll be the person who wants to be obviously detached from everything that's going on, right? I'll speak, therapist here, so charge me later. Like I've experienced moments for myself where I'm experiencing so much and I know that I have strong circles around me, but I intentionally pull out, pull back, pull away. And, thank God that I have a good group of guys who will always check on me, who will always call when they know they ain't heard from me. They know, okay, Rob is in one of those moods, so let me go call and make sure he ain't jumped out a window yet. And it's difficult. It becomes more difficult in church because we don't honestly do relationship well in church, right? That, like, our attachments in church are somewhat superficial. And it becomes a, hey, girl, I sit in the same row as you. I'm in the same ministry as you. We supposed to be best friends. And y'all walk out, and there is no checkup. There is no follow-up, right? As long as I see them on Sunday. We take a lot of times in church and in other social circumstances, we take the fact that we might not see that person again that next week, right? We leave on Sunday, and there's always next Sunday. Or we'll leave the fraternity meeting, there's always next meeting. We'll leave the sorority gathering, there's always the next one, when that's just not true.
That's good. That's good. That's good. When it comes to encountering bad breakups, whether romantic or non-romantic, whether if it's in ministry or outside of ministry, we have to forgive. As Christians, we have to forgive. But forgiveness is not always a permit for someone to come back in our lives. Who wants to just tackle this? When is it good to just move on, and when is it safe to forgive? Anybody? Come on.
I've had to learn that forgiveness is not for the other person. Forgiveness is for me, because 9 times out of 10, they done moved on, they're sleeping well at night, and they ain't thinking about me or what they did to me. And I can run into them again, and they won't even remember why I was mad, why they were mad. And so I had to learn, and I learned the hard way, that holding grudges only steals from me. It only steals from me. There's only so much someone can do until you just open yourself up as a target, and you just allowing people to do and treat you any old kind of way. And so I just had to learn that forgiveness simply means that I am choosing not to let that situation or that person hold me hostage any longer. They won't hold my thoughts hostage. They won't throw my mind, my actions won't be held hostage, because genuinely I'm a kind person. So if you hurt me, I don't want to change who I genuinely am just because you hurt me. Like, I don't desire to change because I've been hurt. And so I've had to learn that I can forgive, but I can still make sure that I protect myself so that you don't get the opportunity to do it to me again.
Said a mouthful. You said a mouthful. Bridget, how has forgiveness released you of some anxiety or just mental anguish? Can you give us personal testimony? You ain't got to say names.
Forgiveness has allowed for me to see myself differently. It's allowed for me to gain more empathy for people. It's allowed for me to learn how to protect myself in different situations. Just like Melissa said, protecting ourselves from different situations, and you learn that through forgiving other people. And so I think that, sometimes you have to seek forgiveness for yourself first and then seek it outwards. But yeah, forgiveness has definitely allowed for me to become a better person in a way. It's
Throughout this discussion, you guys have done a great job of not only just assessing the problem, but also sharing ways to solve problems or to aid us on our mental health journey and on our faith journey. Claude, let me ask you a question. What are some healthy ways that we could use to overcome bad relationships? Some healthy ways of getting over. We don't want to be dismissive. We don't want to fake it. Well, some healthy ways where you can be authentically over that or them.
Yeah, so I think you have to process through the emotion. A lot of times when we experience any type of pain or heartache, a lot of people try to just compartmentalize and just move on, and you're still kind of a victim of that emotion that you went through, and it can show up and manifest in other ways. Like you might think you're totally healed from something, and you might be triggered by something else that somebody else did that had nothing to do with that situation, and it's really tapping on some hurt that you haven't had a chance to heal from. So I think you have to talk about it. You have to talk about it. You have to process through it. There's different ways you can do that. If you're not a big talker, I think journaling is a great exercise to do, because what journaling does is it gives you an opportunity to have that release and express yourself through writing. And then also it gives you an opportunity to go back on previous entries, and you can kind of compare yourself, you know, to where you were maybe a year ago. And it's like, man, I've made so much progress, you know, since this heartache a year ago. I'm moving in the right direction, and that can help give you some hope. So I like journaling, processing through the emotion by talking about it, finding some other ways to kind of physically express yourself, whether it's through, you know, working out, whether it's through boxing, whether it's through yoga, quiet reflection time. I'm really big on mindfulness meditation. And it's just the practice of just being present in the moment, and not and just accepting things as they come, and not trying to change them. Because, you know, sometimes we're trying to push ourselves through this heartache and pain, you know, a lot quicker than we should be doing. And sometimes you have to sit in that, you know, and be comfortable with that, and just accept the emotions that's coming to you at that point in time. And then also, you know, I'm always going to plug therapy. Going to therapy is one of the best things that you can do for yourself, because you have a professional who's non-biased, who's there to listen to you. You can vent to them. They're going to validate how you feel. They're going to normalize the situations that you're going through, and they're going to help provide you with hope and encouragement, and give you some practical tools on how to navigate through that hurt.
Thank you for that. Robert, what are some holistic That's good. That's good. I'm sitting in between two creatives. Bridget's creative, Melissa's creative. Melissa sings. Bridget, you are like an artist. What's some out the box ways that you can suggest that we can overcome or heal our heart? Or it could be something that you experience, or just something that you think is helpful. I know last year, or maybe 2 years ago, we did something on art therapy, and psychologists use creative out-the-box ways in art instead of just, you know, dialogue between the therapists. What are some creative ways that you may have overcome heartache that may be helpful to someone that a lot of us may not just think about?
That's a real good question. I would say something that I've recently learned through therapy. Okay, through therapy, all right, is that I stopped dreaming. And so it came out through several sessions. It took like maybe 3 months for that to be the discovery. And so once I realized I stopped dreaming, my therapist, she told me, she said, every day I want you to write a story. And so we tried it in one session. The first session, we tried this. Y'all, I couldn't do it. And so she was like, and I mean, it has to be a false story. And so I'm coming up with a story off the cuff, and she like, Melissa, that's real. That can happen. And I was like, well, and she was like, no, I need you to break through and give me something that is just like so outlandish. And so from that experience, I started coming up with these stories that were just like ridiculous. And I brought her a story. She was like, girl, you made it. You done came up with this is ridiculous. And we laughed. And so I think one really creative thing that I learned from that experience is that whatever you do, it doesn't have to be compared to some other specific way of doing a thing. It can be something that is so, as long as it brings about some kind of comfort and some kind of breakthrough for you, then that's all that matters. And so for me, that creative way was literally putting mustard on clouds and putting mud in the middle of a bamboo shoe with green snot hanging from the ceiling. But at the end of the day, I realized that it helped to heal a space in my heart where I had stopped dreaming, and now I'm dreaming again.
I love that. I love that. Thank you for that. We want to tune into the chat. We want to answer or look at some questions that's in the chat for our panelists. Can we get some questions that are in the chat? We want to make this interactive and be sure that we're engaging our virtual viewers. Again, thank you for tuning in. We hope you're being blessed by this discussion on mental health and faith. Come on, help us. What you see in the chat?
From the chat, one can answer. What is your advice for when youth believe there is nothing to live for, or they have low or no expectations for their life?
Anybody want to answer that? Anyone?
I do. I think identity is so important and so silenced at the same time. And many of our youth feel as though they have nothing to live for because their identity has been stolen, identity theft, right? The enemy has stolen their identity. And so what my encouragement would be to someone that says they have nothing to live for is to literally strip yourself of every title, every comment that has been put on you that you should be this or should be that. Find someone who can help you strip yourself and then get to the core of who you really are. Because when somebody asks you, who are you? And if you have no title, and you have no job, or you have no this, or you have no that, many people will have nothing to say about who they are. But the real reality is we're not our titles, we're not our jobs, we're not our families, but there is something at the core of every human being, and that's who you really are. Whether you're kind, are you the friend that people come to, whatever it is. So that would be my advice, to strip yourself of every thing that somebody put on you, and that's not an easy thing to do. So again, it's Jesus and the couch. We turn to Jesus in prayer, and you turn to therapy to have some conversations.
That's good. That's good. Let's take a couple more questions from the chat.
How long is too long to not forgive? What's a timeline for forgiveness?
Timeline for forgiveness. Is there one?
I don't think that there is a timeline for forgiveness because different situations require more time for you to heal. And so I think that you should be realistic in what you need in the process before like rushing yourself to forgive somebody. Because one thing you don't want to do is you forgive somebody and then something else happens and you immediately go back to the thing that hurt you the first time. And so you don't want to be wishy-washy in your forgiveness. So you have to make sure that the forgiveness is genuine and really pure with a, outward look to move forward or, just move on. But I don't think that you should rush it at all.
Can I add to that?
Go ahead.
So I agree. I don't think that there's a timeline, but I do think that you should be very attentive to your unforgiveness. I think that you need to be mindful that you can get stuck in this hurt so long that it inhibits your ability to move forward with God, right? That I'm so stuck in this feeling, it goes back to I'm just moving on, right? And so you can perceive that it's not something that you need to revisit, but yes, don't give yourself a timeline, but be mindful enough to know when it's time to move, because it's always a time to move.
That's good. That's good. Claude, I see you wanted to say something about that.
Yeah, I was going to kind of touch on both of those things, because when you don't forgive, if that, the person that hurt you, they still have some sort of control over you. They're still, you still can be triggered by whatever situation you went through. So, to Bridget's point, there is no timeline to forgiveness. You have to do it at your own pace. But then also what Reverend Buckner said, that you have to actively work at forgiving somebody. It's not something that you can be complacent with or think it's just going to happen just by osmosis. You have to actively work through those emotions so you can get to a place where you can genuinely forgive somebody and not hold it over their head at a later point in time.
That's good. That's good. Forgiveness is definitely a journey. Let's take one more from the chat.
Does forgiveness coincide with moving on?
No. Oh, I gotta say something else?
Yeah, please,
Okay.
please. We are a thinking church.
So I think, from my perspective, forgiveness says that you have the capacity to move forward, not move on. There's a difference, right? Moving on says that I'm moving with whatever I took from that place, which could be the hurt, which could be the unforgiveness, which could be the anger, the frustration, the bitterness, the shame. It could be whatever it is. I'm just going to carry it with me, right? Moving forward in forgiveness suggests that I've dealt with the issues or the scars or whatever has occurred to me in that moment. I've dealt with it. I'm healed from it, and I can move forward from it. Moving on with it, moving forward from it.
That's good. That's good. Anyone else want to say anything about that? We wrap up the chat. I got one more question. Let's hear it.
As far as the quarter-life crisis, what advice do you have for young adults who are trying to find that balance? We see, a lot of older adults who seem like they have it together, and I know our generation, we have a lot on our plate, and if we're not accomplishing those things in the certain amount of time, it can cause anxiety or depression, or you're trying to make more time, but you're struggling with finding that time management because you might have all of these dreams or gifts where you are in certain spaces, where you're using those gifts. But as far as balancing everything, what advice or tactics do you have for people to get to that place where they're finally seeing those results, or not just placing their happiness in those results?
Anyone? How she navigates the quarter life crisis?
I can kind of speak on that a little bit. So 2 things. People don't share enough. And people don't ask enough questions anymore. I recently attended a Black student graduation, and I asked the question, how many of you know specific things about the people in your circle? And a lot of them didn't, because they don't ask questions anymore. They don't ask about background. They don't ask about where you come from, what you believe, who you believe. They don't ask those kind of questions. So for my young adults, y'all pressing y'all way, all of this cultural capital is right at your fingertips. Start asking questions. Don't be afraid anymore to dig deep into your surroundings, because I promise you, if you open your mouth and ask, you will find what you need. And then there are people who will be willing to share. I'm gonna use Bridget as an example. I gotta use her because she'll ask me Melissa, I'm trying to figure out how to navigate this. How we gonna navigate it? Since she asked the question, all right, let's carve out some time. We're gonna navigate it together. Let's put this piece here. Let's put this piece here. And then we're gonna come back and pick them other pieces up later. But let's not spend too much time on those pieces until we get this piece in place and then this piece. So I think at the end of the day, asking questions, because closed mouths don't get fed, and you can't do it by yourself. And then partnering with people who are gonna be transparent and tell you, because I tell Bridget, my plate's so full today, if I drop it, I'm gonna drop myself too. And so being able to be transparent, like I'm wearing multiple hats, here's how I'm navigating my hats, but I need to keep it real with you to let you know that you ain't the only one that's going through it. We are all juggling a lot, and we're trying to figure it out.
That's good. That's good. We want to thank you guys for rocking with us in the chat. Thank you for your engagement. We want to provide you with some helpful resources to help you on your mental health journey. Right on the screen, we have some resources, some therapists, some non-for-profits that if you click on the QR code, I promise you it will bless you. Hey, therapy is not counter or doesn't conflict with your faith. Just like when you sick, you go to doctor, and you come in here and you get on the altar. When you are depressed and something just ain't feeling right, it's okay to seek a therapist. It does not mean you're crazy. It does not mean you have any faith. It means that you have a lot of faith because you trust that God can heal medicinally, through conversation, or miraculously. All right? All right, so we want to bless you. Please see the QR code on the screen, click it on, and look at those resources. Hey, we want to thank you for tuning in for another edition of Jesus and the Couch. I want to thank our panelists. Can we give our panelists a round of applause? We want to thank Claude King, Bridget, Pastor Champs, Pastor Buckner. We got to do this again, y'all. Y'all want us to do this again? We got to do this again. Tune in next time where we'll be dealing with two more chambers, church hurt and communal hurt. You do not want to miss that one. Church hurt and communal hurt. And before we wrap up, we got multiple ways to give. You thought you was going to get off this Baptist Live and we don't open up offering? Look, you can give. It's right there on the screen through Cash App, through our website at www.thirdbaptistchicago.org, through text. It's right there on the screen. Please give and be a blessing to this ministry so we can bless others. Y'all ready to go home? Let's go home. Give yourself a round of applause. Be on the lookout for the next one. Thank you for rocking with us for another edition of Jesus and the Couch. Peace.